Hi everyone, this is Mrs. Pearson, your elementary ELL teacher. Today we're going to focus on Chapter 11, Bud Not Buddy vocabulary words. And these are words 9 to 16. I have another video or lesson that focuses on words 1 to 8 as well. So for this lesson, you will need a pencil and a piece of paper or journal page. You're going to divide the paper into 3 equal parts or thirds. Then you're going to write your numbers 9 to 16. The reason why we're starting with 9 is because I already have vocabulary words 1 through 8 for this chapter as well. So if you don't have your paper or pencil, push pause, get your materials, and then push play when you're ready to join me. After you write the vocabulary word, you're going to write a synonym or quick short definition. And a synonym is a word that means the same. For example, combine is a synonym for mix. If you don't catch the short definition or synonym, you can always write the word a second time. And then you're going to draw a quick picture or sketch for each word to help you remember the word. So here's our learning target. I can use pictures and context clues to help me understand descriptive language like metaphors and personification from Chapter 11 of Bud Not Buddy. Success criteria. That means how will you know you're successful at using pictures and context clues to understand the descriptive language in the chapter? Well, here are our steps to success. Number 1, I will write down each vocabulary word. Number 2, write a synonym or short definition for each word. Number 3, listen and follow along to each quote from the chapter. Look for the vocabulary word. So whenever you see this emoji with his hand next to his ear, that means listen and follow along. And then finally, 4, go back and draw a quick sketch for each word, a sketch or a picture. It doesn't have to be a detailed drawing. So here is our emoji that says listen and follow along. Bud uses a lot of figurative language when he talks. And figurative language versus literal language. Here's an example of figurative language. He ran like the wind. Literal language, he ran fast. So listen, one type of figurative language or descriptive language is personification. Personification has the word person in it because personification is giving human qualities to a thing or idea. Personification. The sun was peeking through the clouds. The sun was acting like a human or a person. That's why it's called personification. Number 9, commenced. Commenced means already begun, got started. And if this word sounds familiar, we've already done it in a previous chapter. Commenced means already begun, got started. If you remember these pictures. And here's our quote. The car only went 30 giant steps before it commenced to bucking and finally cut right off Bud. So the car he was in went 30 giant steps, and that's personification. It's making the car sound like a person. So listen, another type of figurative language is metaphor. A metaphor is a comparison of two things. You do not use the words like or as in a metaphor. So here's the metaphor. The racer was a lightning rod coming across the finish line. So number 10 is slew. Slew. S-L-E-W, slew. Slew is a very large amount, a multitude. Multitude comes from the word multiply because when you multiply, you get larger and larger. Slew, and here's our quote. We hadn't been driving for a minute before he started asking a whole slew of questions. So a large amount of questions. Slew, a large amount, a multitude. All right. Number 11, peanut head. Peanut head, a head shaped like a peanut. Bud's head is a peanut head. So that's a metaphor. Bud's head is a peanut head. Anyone ever tell you you got a little peanut head? Lefty Lewis. Peanut head. Head shaped like a peanut. Number 12. This is a famous person, George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver. George Washington Carver was a famous African American who was born into slavery. He was a scientist, botanist, inventor, and an educator in Tuskegee, Alabama. He was famous for his work with peanuts. George Washington Carver. So, a famous scientist. Boy looks like one of George Washington Carver's experiments. Sprouted legs and run off. You sure you're not from Tuskegee, Alabama? Lefty. So he looks like one of George Washington Carver's experiments. Sprouted legs and run off. So that is actually a simile because he's comparing, Lefty Lewis is comparing Bud to one of George Washington Carver's peanut or plant experiments. Number 13, Fort Gordon. Fort Gordon, that is a place. Fort Gordon is a military training camp for soldiers in the state of Georgia. It was founded in 1917 to train soldiers for World War I, also known as Camp Gordon. So Fort Gordon is a military training camp for soldiers in the state of Georgia. It was founded in 1917 to train soldiers for World War I, also known as Camp Gordon. So here's a picture of Fort Gordon or Camp Gordon. The human American eagle, all those, that is a picture of an eagle made up of humans. There's a bunch of people standing in the shape of an eagle, taken at Camp Gordon in 1918 with 12,500 people. So here's our quote. Well, I've got to tell you, I haven't heard so many sirs since I was back at Fort Gordon in Georgia training for the big war. So that's what Lefty Lewis said to Bud. I haven't heard so many soldiers since I was back at Fort Gordon. Number 14, the Big War. The Big War, a major conflict fought between 1914 and 1918 in Europe, also known as the Great War or World War I. The Big War. World War I, the Great War. If you notice, the soldiers in that picture are wearing gas masks because they used gas to when they were fighting and they didn't want to have to breathe it in. And then there's a picture of another soldier from World War I or the Big War. So Britain, France, Ireland, and Russia were part of an alliance called the Triple Entente, while Germany aligned itself with Austria-Hungary, also known as the Central Powers. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo on the 28th of June 1914, it triggered a chain of events that resulted in World War I. So if you notice, there's a picture of the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo. And that started World War I, or the Big War. The U.S. joined the Central Powers Alliance. Over 17 million people were killed in the war. So, number 15, redcap. Redcap. A redcap loads bags and helps passengers get their belongings onto a train. So, a redcap is a person, a worker, that loads bags and helps passengers get their belongings onto a train. They often wore a red cap. That's why they called them a red cap. So number 16, Pullman porter. We've talked about this in previous lessons. Pullman porter. A Pullman porter assists the passengers once they are on the train. So the red cap assists and loads bags, and the Pullman porter helps them once they get onto the train. And here's our quote, Bud, red caps are the men who work at the railroad station loading the train. My husband is a Pullman porter. He takes care of the people once they're on the trains. Mrs. Sleet, or Lefty Lewis's daughter. All right, it's time to check your work. For chapter 11, words 9 to 16. Number 9, commenced. Already begun, got started, commenced. Number 10, slew. A very large amount, a multitude, slew. A slew of people, a slew of numbers. Number 11, peanut head. A head shaped like a peanut. That was Bud. And then 12 was George Washington Carver, an African American scientist that was famous for his work with peanuts. So if you didn't catch some of these, push pause. Make sure you've written all of your words, the synonym, and also a quick picture or sketch. And when you're finished with these words, push play. Number 13, Fort Gordon, a military training camp for soldiers in the state of Georgia. Number 14, the Big War, a major conflict fought between 1914 and 1918 in Europe, also known as the Great War or World War I. And it all started with the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. And number 15, red cap, a person who loads the bags on the train, red cap. And number 16, Pullman porter, a person who assists people on the train. So 13, Fort Gordon, 14, the Big War, 15, red cap, and 16, Pullman porter. So make sure you have all these words, their synonym or short definition, and a quick picture or sketch. If you need to, push pause, finish your work, and then push play to rejoin me. So it's time to reflect. What was our learning target? I can use pictures and context clues to help me understand important words from chapter 11 of Bud Not Buddy. Would you give yourself a 4? I could teach this lesson. I easily wrote all the vocabulary words with a synonym or short definition and quick sketch. Would you give yourself a 3? I wrote all the vocabulary words, wrote a synonym or definition, and drew a sketch for most words. 2, I wrote most of the vocabulary words, wrote a synonym, and then drew just for a sum of the words. Or 1, I wrote some of the vocabulary words but did not write a synonym or picture for each word. How do you think you did? 4, 3, 2, or 1? Thank you, boys and girls, for doing lesson or chapter 11 with me, the vocabulary words of Bud Not Buddy. Have a great day.